Hi, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and I'm joined by my good friend, Dee Pierce, who's the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends.
Happy to be here.
And this is an unusual Thursday night show for me. I had to cancel my Tuesday night show because I had a severe case of sciatica for the first time in some years that happened. That was unusual. I've been recovering from that, but I'm here tonight and I'm in good shape for this
hmm
particular video. So, our topics are ceasefire Kabuki. Of course, that relates to the war, Israel, okay, Iran, and the United States. And a key nuclear type of allegation about how the war started. We'll be talking about that.
Okay.
And then our third topic is that the war ain't over, or in polite English, it isn't over.
No, it isn't.
So there we are, and we'll talk a lot about that. So please do like, share, and subscribe. We're going to start by sharing on Facebook for sure, but please do like, share, and subscribe so we get a pretty good audience for this one because
Yes.
we have a lot of good things to say tonight. So,
Yes. Okay. Sharing and sharing and sharing.
okay, good. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, I have to refresh the page or I can't share.
Okay. I have my different accounts that I share to.
Oh, that's good. So,
And hello, Steve Wolfbrandt is here.
yes, I just saw Steve
Yes.
check in. That's good.
And
Hello, Steve. Oh, Steve has checked in on Facebook and on YouTube.
well, that's good.
Well, thank you, Steve. Okay, so let us begin with a piece from Larry Johnson,
Okay.
and I will share that.
Okay.
And
I'm going over to X and sharing your
okay,
show on X.
thank you.
Okay. Let's see.
So this one is called Iran versus the U.S. and Israel. Kabuki theater on steroids. And this piece is a few days old. It was published on June 23rd. And uh, there's the logo of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency,
Mm-hmm.
with the symbol of the atom on it, and a laurel wreath for peace. But that ain't exactly what happened. Anyway, any moment now, I'm expecting John Cleese, a veteran of Monty Python, says Larry, to jump out of the bushes and announce the creation of the Ministry of Silly Wars, with Donald Trump as a deranged leader. For you youngsters out there, Monty Python skit, the Ministry of Silly Walks, helped make the members of MP legends. MP is Monty Python, of course. I had to reference Monty Python because the line of bullshit the Trump administration is feeding the American people and the world about the amazing, obliterating U.S. attack on Iranian nuclear sites on Sunday morning is more ridiculous than all of the silly walks pictured in the following video. And then Larry leaves a video from Monty Python, which we will not play. My hopes that Donald Trump would finally act like a responsible adult are dashed. He's a dangerous buffoon. While the team around him are working frantically to maintain the fiction that Trump has a vision and is calling the shots on the foreign policy front, he's careening around the globe like an out-of-control cue ball on a billiards table. It started a week ago. First, he claimed to know everything about the timing of the Israeli decapitation attack, and then within 48 hours denied knowing anything. He insists he wants peace, but did nothing to stop Israel from launching an unprovoked attack on Iran on the eve of talks in Oman between the U.S. and Iran. Now comes the Sunday morning bombings of Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. I'm not sure if it's Fordow or Fordo, but there we go. The White House insists that all were obliterated, that Iran's nuclear program was wiped out. Only one teeny tiny problem: none of the imagery from satellites supports that claim. Before Sunday, we knew where Iran's enriched uranium was located, and IAEA inspectors had access to the 3 sites. Now Iran removed the enriched uranium to a classified site and is moving to end IAEA inspection of Iran's nuclear program. Quote, the National Security Committee of Iran's parliament approved the general outline of a bill meant to fully suspend Tehran's cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog. Semi-official Tasnim news agency reported on, citing committee spokesperson Ibrahim Razai. Mr. Razai said that according to the bill, installing surveillance cameras, allowing inspections, and submitting reports to the IAEA would be suspended as long as the security of nuclear facilities is not guaranteed. Parliament still has to approve the bill in a plenary session. If I'm not mistaken, that session has now occurred. I believe Parliament has approved the bill. If I'm wrong about that, then someone please correct me. Anyway, that's the end of that quote. Way to go, Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of ending Iran's quest for a nuclear weapon, which shelved 22 years ago, which Iran shelved 22 years ago, that's 2003 if you're counting, Donald Trump has given Iranian hardliners more proof that the only way Iran can be secure in the future is to manufacture nuclear warheads. Then today in Washington, D.C., around 6 p.m., Trump announced a ceasefire between Iran and Israel following his meeting in Moscow with Vladimir Putin, Iran's foreign minister, um, 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 uh, foreign minister Abbas, uh, uh, um, Mr. Abbas Araghchi, issued the following statement. The military operations of our powerful armed forces to punish Israel for its aggression continued until the very last minute, until 4 a.m. Together with all Iranians, I thank our brave armed forces who remain ready to defend our dear country until the last drop of blood and who responded to any uh, um, 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 to any enemy attacks until the very last minute. Israel launched a flurry of final attacks on Tehran immediately prior to the 4 a.m. Tehran time deadline for the ceasefire to go into effect. Meanwhile, in Iraq, there were several attacks on U.S. bases prior to 4 a.m. by Iraqi groups aligned with Iran. Quote, in central Iraq, the suicide drone struck the military airport in Camp Taji, north of Baghdad, targeting a radar unit and fuel tanks. No casualties were reported. West of Baghdad, an explosion was reported near the American Victoria base, with reports of power outages. And then also there were American drones reported flying over Baghdad. In northern Iraq, 2 explosions were heard at the Balad Air Base, also known as the Bakr Air Base, in Salah al-Din Governorate, with flames seen rising from the base. In southern Iraq, a drone attack targeted the air radar systems at the Imam at the Imam Ali Air Base, also known as the Talil Air Base, in Syria. Moments ago, air defenses also activated at the American Ain al-Assad Air Base in Anbar province in western Iraq, following a reported targeting by one drone. While Trump is desperately trying to take credit for these developments, the ceasefire happened in spite of him, not because of his actions. I suspect Russia, with an assist from China, made this happen. The real story is that Israel caved. Notwithstanding the massive pro-Israel propaganda campaign claiming that Iran was crumbling under Israel's assault, but Iran's bevy of missiles, both ballistic and cruise, wreaked havoc on Israel and caused significant damage. This is a major defeat for Netanyahu. Let's hope he is quickly ushered out of office. By the way, these attacks have continued beyond the ceasefire time, because one or another party has broken the ceasefire in the last 24 hours. There was a ballistic missile that hit the Mossad building, but supposedly there were 3,000 of the Mossad people who died in that attack. If that report is true, It's, a really major victory uh, um, for the Iranians. There was also another seven-floor building which was completely ground into dust by one of the missiles that had a particularly heavy warhead attached to it. Okay. Anyway, the attacks by Israel on Iran have continued. They're more sporadic now, of course, and the retaliatory attacks by the Iranians are also sporadic, but they are very effective because the Iranians seem to have withheld, their most deadly missiles for the end of the conflict. So again, this is a major defeat for Netanyahu, says Larry. Let's hope he is quickly ushered out of office. Can't be too soon, folks.
Exactly.
So that's that first piece.
Okay.
Do you have any comments on that piece? We have greetings from Earl of Laurel and Steve. Robert Copeland says, APAC has influence with President Trump. Yeah, probably. Monty Python and the Holy Grail was the best Monty Python movie, in my opinion.
Yes, I always enjoyed watching Monty Python.
For some reason, it was something I never got into. I don't know why. There must be something lacking in my sense of humor. I knew it was very popular with other people, but it was one of the things I said.
Well, 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 not everybody's into English humor, you know.
Yeah, I always thought I was into English humor, but somehow I never took to that.
Okay.
Anyway, I do appreciate that many other people found it very, very funny, and I can always celebrate that. Okay, let's go on to our next piece because we have a lot to cover tonight,
Yes.
which is by Pepe Escobar, and that is yours.
Okay, let me enlarge my screen here. Okay, the Ceasefire Kabuki. Pepe Escobar, June 25th, 2025.
Yes, just yesterday. Let me get this scrolling here. What is this photo? Looks like people burning an American flag in Iran.
Yes.
And then Pepe says,
In the end, predictably, the circus ringmaster went taco. Trump always chickens out. He was terrified by three crucial reality-based developments. One, the Iranian message on preparing to close the Strait of Hormuz. The CIA had warned Trump that China was viscerally opposed to the strait being blocked. That's one of the reasons, according to a deep state old hand, that Trump decided to go ahead anyway with his quote spectacular theatrical op on Fordow. But
the
when the
question is, was it an oak or was it a flop? We're not
right,
sure.
but when the specter of a blocked Hamas destroying the global economy became real, he went taco.
He did.
Two, the Iranian warning conveyed by the bombing of the Al Udeid base in Qatar, the military jewel in the imperial crown in West Asia. Even Atlantis' sources in Doha confirmed the damage to the evacuated base was, quote, monumental, with at least three missiles hitting their targets. Tehran was unmistakably saying, we can hit you anywhere, anytime with anything we want. and your GCC lackeys will blame you for it.
Okay, a couple of things here. Uh, if, I think this is the first article I've seen so far which talks about the damage to the airbase in Qatar, uh, uh, which describes that damage as uh, as monumental. In other words, most of the sources seem to neglect the discussion of damage to that base. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Second thing is GCC lackeys are Gulf, uh, something like Gulf Coast Conference states. They include, uh, all of the nations, around the peninsula, on the Gulf there, who are viewed by Pepe as lackeys of the United States, with the exception of Yemen, okay, and Oman.
Mm-hmm.
Oman is fairly neutral, okay, and Yemen, of course, stands in notable opposition uh, to the genocide in Palestine. I should say in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, please go on.
3. Arguably the key reason the genocidals in Tel Aviv are running out of interceptors fast, and a fast their whole porous air defense network is in trouble. In the last substantial missile volley on occupied Palestine on Monday morning, interception rate fell below 50%, and Iran started targeting Israel's electric grid. Iran's new directive, strategic offense, not patience, was meant to completely paralyze the Israeli economy. On top of it, the genocidals had already begged Tehran to, quote, end the war. Tehran answered the time had not yet arrived, so the genocidals begged Daddy Trump to rescue them. The chain of events leading to the ceasefire remains murky. A key accelerating factor was Putin's personal meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Arghashi at the Kremlin on Monday. Speaking on behalf of Ayatollah Khamenei, Arghashi may have asked for a solid supply of weapons and most of all defense systems, but these will take time, especially considering that the strategic partnership recently approved by both the Duma and the Majlis in Tehran is not officially a military alliance.
Okay, just to clarify for those who don't know, okay, the Duma is the legislative body uh, of Russia, and the Majlis, is um, the legislative body of Iran. Please go on.
Yet, according to sources in Moscow who were informed about the meeting, Putin did position Russia at the center of a possible resolution, thus displacing Washington. Dream Team Trump 2.0 was incensed. Trump boasted that both Iran and Israel had called him almost simultaneously to arrange a ceasefire. Nonsense. Only Tel Aviv did, as Putin made it clear once again that Russia would back Iran. He indirectly offered Trump an off ramp. True to character, the circus ringmaster jumped on it, marketing his own branded ceasefire reality show style. And this only 2 days after gloating that the Iranian nuclear programs was obliterated. He insists on it even as U.S. intel admits the program may have been set back for only a matter of months. A supreme taboo has been broken. Iran has learned a few important lessons the hardest way, paying a horrendous price. Tehran was way too transparent and reasonable dealing with a bunch of gangsters. From following the IAEA nuclear monitoring that turned out to be a process of amassing precious intel for Israeli targeting, and believing in diplomacy and honoring agreements that were unceremoniously ditched. There's no diplomacy when it comes to dealing with the imperial Leviathan behemoth, especially as it contemplates in horror its footprint being reduced all across the global south.
Okay, for those who didn't quite catch the last expression, he's talking about the U.S.
Mhm.
Please go on.
Domestically, though, Iran is going to the next level. There are at least three factions in confrontation. Ayatollah Khamenei and his close circle, plus the IRGC, the reformist, embodied by the meek Pezeshkian presidency, and what could be construed as secular nationalists who want a strong Iran, but not as a theo-democracy.
Okay, that deserves a couple of comments too. First of all, it's the first time I've seen Iran characterized as a democracy of any kind. Pepe calls it a theo democracy, and that concept is an interesting one. Okay, I think. Okay, but also in pointing to the three factions there, I think he makes a point which often is not made. Okay, usually people just talk about uh, uh, the Ayatollah and his circle, plus the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps. Okay, and then they talk about the reformists. But this is the first time I've seen anyone talk about, secular nationalists who want uh, uh, a strong Iran.
Mhm.
So that's an interesting analysis. I'd like to see that in more detail, okay, in one of his future articles. Because when people talk mostly about the internal politics of Iran, they're only talking about the first two factions. It's very rare to see anybody pointing out a third faction. Please go on.
The IRGC now has all the power, defending the homeland against the deadly Zionist Axis.
Okay, and
Empire.
that is a great point. In
Mhm.
other words, that the IRGC now has all the power. In other words, within the first faction, he's saying the IRGC is now dominant, and that the first faction, of course, is dominant over the other two. So I think that's a very important point. Please go on.
The IRGC now has all the power, defending the homeland against the deadly Zionist Axis. Empire included, crystallized a widespread sentiment of national unity and pride. All sectors of the Iranian population, 90 million, someone tell pathetic Marco Rubio, rallied around the flag.
I think that needs to be emphasized also, because one of the things the United States hope to do in this conflict, both the United States, okay, and Israel, with their first attack, was to divide Iran up and get the people, fighting with each other to establish a certain chaos, inside of the country. We never expected that the people of Iran, who generally on a day-to-day basis, uh, tend to protest against the government, to say, negative things about the government, to express this kind of dissatisfaction, or that kind of dissatisfaction. Nobody expected the rallying around the flag that occurred. When I say nobody, I mean nobody within the Western elites expected the Iranians, to rally around the flag. I think people who knew Iran well did expect it. But generally, in the mainstream Western press, it was a surprise to them uh, when people came close together as a result of the attacks by Israel and the United States. Okay, please go on, Dee.
Conceptually, the ceasefire, nobody knows how long it will last, is adverse to Iran because its increasing deterrence capacity is now lost. Israel will have its air defenses feverishly replenished, while Iran alone will need months and even years to rebuild.
Okay, so I have to disagree with this to this extent. I do think that ceasefire is a disadvantage to Iran because at the end they were really winning the war, doing irreversible damage to Israel. I think
Right.
the economy was in tatters. Okay, Israel really needed a breather. Uh, the airfields were all being destroyed. The ports, were being destroyed. The industries were being destroyed. If people were free to leave, they would have lost millions of people over this period, but the state has shut them in and has very closely censored everything, okay, as much as it can. But it was looking like Israel was ready to fall apart. That if this had gone on for another 2 or 3 weeks, that it was Israel that would have fallen apart. Okay, not Iran. So that's the way it was looking to me and to many other observers. Uh, and so that advantage is now lost, okay, to some degree, uh, okay, because uh, uh, the ceasefire is going on to some degree. Now, of course, the Israelis are still violating the ceasefire
Of course.
because they're nuts. Okay, and the Iranians are hitting back at them very, very hard. They are taking no nonsense from the Israelis, and that is good to see. Okay, but I also want to take exception to the idea that Israel will have its air defenses feverishly um, um, strengthened, while Iran is going to, need months and even years to rebuild. The reason
Mm.
why I don't think that's true is because I don't think that we in the West have the production capacity to replace the missiles, in the Israeli air defense, that can knock down, uh, um, um, the missiles, uh, the interception missiles. Uh, okay, they are now down, to a relatively few, and we don't have the production capacity to replace them. The Israeli production capacity is pretty much destroyed right now, and our production capacity has been severely restricted in terms of those kinds of missiles for some time. So I think it's going to be quite a bit of time before the air defenses of the Israelis are repaired to any extent. And even if they are repaired, uh, it seems to me the Iranian missiles of late are having an easy time, okay, in beating them. But on the Iranian side, the Russians have started shipping the S-400 systems in quantity, to Iran now. Okay, and I don't think it's going to be months for them to arrive and to be integrated into the air defense system of Iran. So I actually think that Iran, okay, that the breathing period will be good for Iran from the air defense side. I think they, of course, will lose something on the offense because the Israelis, will have some time to recover, certainly. Uh, and I think that they were on the point of losing the whole war. So, yeah, in other words, that's an advantage for the Israelis. But I think in the area, okay, of air defenses, I think the Israeli air defense system, like 3 weeks from now or 2 months from now, is still going to be very porous, while the Iranian air defense system will be far stronger,
Mm-hmm.
than it has been since the first day of the war. So I disagree with that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I disagree. Yeah, I disagree with that as well. And also, where Iran is concerned, they have been arresting a lot of Mossad agents. You have people from Europe and India, from all around. They've been arresting a lot of people.
right,
And
and I think that's very important. Okay, as a trend. I mean, hopefully they've broken up the networks,
mhm,
and isolated them, one from another, so they're not able to act in concert, as they were on the first day of the war.
mhm,
They were acting in concert, and that was devastating for the defense. Okay, but maybe now, the Iranians have been able to recognize the agents, to find them, uh, to get into the networks, and maybe we're beginning to see the destruction of the spy networks inside of Iran.
mhm.
And that's going to be a big change and a big advantage
Definitely.
for the Iranians going forward.
Oh, definitely. Okay. Let me see. Okay, the imperial modus operandi remains the same. The circus ringmaster saw that a monster humiliation was at hand, something like Israel's Vietnam. So he announced a one-sided ceasefire and fled. Yet, the configuration for the next battles has changed. If Washington decides to escalate again, or resorts to the certified practice of using terror proxies, Iran has the de facto leader of the resistance will resolutely counterattack. The myth of genocidal invincibility has been shattered forever. The whole global south has seen it and now takes it in serious consideration. It remains open to serious discussion whether Tehran will finally opt to follow a DPRK model to counteract the failed, so far, imposition of a Libya and or Syria model.
Okay, one thing to add here: the DPRK, of course, okay, is uh, uh, um, 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 uh, the Democratic, People's Republic of Korea, uh, also known as North Korea to us, and they have had a very successful model, okay, of developing missiles, with nuclear weapons. And the result of that has been, that the United States basically leaves them alone. And so that's the model. Okay, please go on.
Okay. It remains open. Oh, yeah, we just said that. Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah, kind of uranium enrichment will continue with an added film noir plot twist. Nobody knows where the uranium is. The Empire of Chaos, predictably, will never stop. Only when the whole global South unites with an iron will and force it to stop. The conditions are not in place yet. As it stands, the real ceasefire would be between the US and the global South, led institutionally by Russia, China. BRICS, and several other multipolar organizations. The chance of the U.S. ruling classes honoring such a long-lasting ceasefire, if it ever happens, are less than zero. As for the Iran-Israel ceasefire, that's not the end of the war. On the contrary, it's the dubious end of just the first hot battle. The dogs and hyenas of war will be back, sooner or later. There will be blood over and over again, yet at least a supreme taboo has been broken. That death cult in West Asia can indeed be mortally wounded.
I think that was a brilliant analysis, by Pepe, generally speaking, and his focusing on the overall global significance of it is, very, very important. There's going to be a lot more defiance of the United States, that will be going on in the coming years. All sorts of actors are going, to defy the United States. All sorts of other national actors are going to build their own stock of missiles, ballistic missiles, okay, and cruise missiles in order to resist uh, um, the West. And we don't seem to be doing anything, okay, on our side to meet the new production that is likely to spring up with, with new production of our own. We are not in a period of mobilizing, okay, our own industry, to build up uh, the military, the capacity of the United States. We're experimenting, with a lot of high tech weapon systems that are very, very expensive, but they don't address the new threats that are coming from the hypersonic missiles. Okay, and even when we have something that might be a defense against the hypersonic missiles, we're not developing the industrial capacity to manufacture the new defenses in sufficient quantity to make a difference. Now, okay, I'm not saying that's all bad. From my point of view, that is a good thing because it will mean that the United States is going to have to accept the reality of a multi polar world. Now, we're going to have to learn to coexist in it, and play nice with the other kids. So that's good. I mean, that is what should be happening. But from the standpoint of those who want to see the U.S. continuing the hegemon position that it's had for years and years and years, no, they're going to have to mobilize our industry and our system of capitalism to produce those kinds of things. And they are nowhere along in any campaign to do just that. They are still committed to neoliberalism. That means the private corporations will do what they want to do. Okay, and they won't do what might be demanded from the orientation to defense that the neocons have. In other words, this may be the place where the neocons and the neoliberals part, because the neocons are going to want the neoliberals to spend more and more and more, on our military. And of course, Trump's budget includes quite an increase, for the military, but not enough to close the manufacturing gap. And I don't think there'll ever be a sufficient amount of pressure to overcome what the neoliberals want to do to the economy. So, anyway, that's what I think is going to happen in the future. So, I think we're going to be forced to accept a multipolar world. And I think that's better for us and better for the rest of the world as well.
Oh, I agree 100%.
So, going on. Oh, is there a video of all the damage to the American bases? Uh, well, yeah, there are videos. I mean, it's hard to tell exactly the damage. Earl of Earl says, Monty Python were geniuses. Robert Copeland says, is there a video of all the damage to the American bases? Well, only a few of the American bases have been attacked so far. Okay, the resistance in Iraq has attacked, I guess, two of the bases there. And then we have the main attack of the Iranians on the base, the air base in Qatar. The huge air base in Qatar. There are videos of the missiles hitting that air base, and there are huge explosions, that are going on. Something is being destroyed. I haven't seen, any videos of the results yet, but I've seen videos of the explosions, and those are very, very big and very, very impressive as well. But that's a good question. I would love to see videos of the results. Earl of Laurel, New American Lingo, diplomacy, threats, peace, bombing, stability, chaos. Um, 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 uh, um, uh, 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 negotiations, tricks. Okay, it's Idiocracy meets 1984. Steve Wolfram says, I stand uh, um, um, uh, with Iran. Yep, I don't blame you, Steve, for standing with Iran. Iran's behavior in this has been, I think, rather honorable, rather careful. They have not been the aggressors in any of this, latest round of exchanges. They have acted with a sense of honor and a sense of restraint. They have not been nearly damaging to the Israeli and the U.S. side as they might have been. They have held back. And it's hard to stand with the genociders. So who are you going to stand with? Stand with the people who are fighting the genocide, of course. So let us go on to the next of our pieces. Okay, the next piece is by Alistair Crook. It's the key, nuclear allegation that started the war was coaxed from a Palantir counterintelligence algorithm, says Alistair. This is on June 23rd, 2025. And we picked it up at the UN's review, of course. And there again is a graphic depicting the IAEA on one side and Iranian flag on the other. Trump sided with the Israelis, asserting that Iran was very close to having a bomb, and added he didn't care what Tulsi Gabbard thinks.
Oh, you got to put it up on the screen.
Okay, thanks for reminding me. I did forget to share the screen. Oh, I know what I did. I forgot to hit the share button. There it is. Anyway, here's a quote from Alastair Crooke. He's quoting his own writing. The IAEA board's, quote, non-compliance resolution on the 12th of June, 2025 was the planned precursor for Israel's, quote, bolt from the blue, unquote, strike on Iran the next day. Israelis say the plan to go to war with Iran was grounded in, quote, the opportunity, unquote, to strike, and not the intelligence that Iran was speeding towards a bomb. That was the peg for war. Okay, getting out of the quote now and on with the article. The sudden claim of Iran being very close to a bomb that seemingly jumped out of nowhere, quote unquote, to leave Americans puzzling how could it happen that in the blink of an eye we are going to war, was subsequently refuted by IAEA Chief Grossi to CNN on the 17th of June, but only after the abrupt attack on Iran already had taken place. Quote, we did not have any evidence of a systematic effort by Iran to move to a nuclear weapon, unquote, Grossi confirmed on CNN. The statement drew the following riposte from Iran by its foreign ministry spokesman, his name is Esmail Bakay, on the 19th of June. Quote, this is too late, Mr. Grossi. You obscured this truth in your absolutely biased report that was instrumentalized by E3/US to craft a resolution with baseless allegation of Iranian, quote, non-compliance, unquote. The same resolution then was utilized as a final pretext by a genocidal warmongering regime to wage a war of aggression on Iran and to launch an unlawful attack on our peaceful nuclear facilities. Do you know how many how many innocent Iranians have been killed or maimed as a result of this criminal war? You turned the IAEA into a tool of convenience for non-NPT members to deprive NPT members, translation, the non-NPT member here is Israel, and the NPT member involved here is Iran, to deprive NPT members of their basic right under Article 4. Any clear conscience? To which Dr. Ali Larijani, advisor to the Supreme Leader, added, quote, when the war ends, we will hold the director of the IAEA, Mr. Rafael Grossi, we will hold him accountable, unquote. What they're saying, The Russian Foreign Ministry statement in relation to the escalation of the Iranian-Israeli conflict. Quote, it was precisely these, quote, sympathizers, unquote, EU3, who exerted pressure on the leadership of the IAEA agency to prepare a controversial, quote, comprehensive assessment, unquote, of Iran's nuclear program, the flaws of which were subsequently exploited to push through a biased anti-Iran resolution at the IAEA Board of Governors on the 12th of June 2025. This resolution effectively provided a green light to actions by West Jerusalem leading to tragedy, unquote, i.e. to the sneak attack on the immediate day after the 13th of June, unquote. Behind the scenes, the underpinnings to the 12th of June 2025 IAEA resolution giving pretext for Israel to strike Iran and crafted to sway President Trump to dismiss his own Director of National Intelligence's warnings that there was no evidence of Iran moving towards a bomb, reportedly withdrawn not from Mossad or other Western intelligence services, but from IAEA software, as DD Geopolitics outlines. Since 2015, the IAEA has relied on Palantir's on Palantir's platform, known as the Mosaic platform, a $50 million AI system that sifts through millions of data points, satellite imagery, social media, personnel logs to predict nuclear threats. Quote, Iran's stockpile had been growing steadily for months, yet the narrative of an imminent breakthrough surged only after the IAEA censure on June 6, 2025. That resolution, adopted 19-3, provided Israel a diplomatic cover it needed. The Mosaic platform played a critical role in this pivot. Its data shaped the May 31st report, flagging the anomalies at Fordo, and the Vizon Xi'an. By the way, there were no attacks on the Vizon Xi'an, but on Fordo and Isfahan, and Natanz, and recycling prior allegations, from Turkuzabad, despite years-old Iranian denials and sabotage. The Mosaic platform was conceived originally to identify insurgent activity in Iraq and the country of Afghanistan, unquote. Its algorithm looks to identify and infer, quote, hostile intent from indirect indicators, from metadata, behavioral patterns, signal traffic, not from confirmed evidence. In other words, it postulates what suspects may be thinking or planning. On the 12th of June, Iran leaked documents which it claimed showed IAEA chief Grossi sharing Mosaic outputs with Israel. So, of course, such outputs are supposed to be confidential. The IAEA should not be sharing its data and the outputs of its software with non-IAEA states, I mean, that obviously is a gross violation of the IAEA classification and confidentiality. By 2018, a Mosaic platform had processed more than 400 million discrete data objects and had helped impute suspicion to over 60 Iranian sites, such as to justify the unannounced IAEI inspections of those sites under the JCPOA. These outputs were dependent largely on the algorithm equations, were incorporated into formal IAEA safeguard reports, and were widely accepted by UN member states and non-proliferation regimes as credible, evidence-based assessments. Mosaic, however, is not a passive system. It is trained to infer from its algorithm hostile intent, but when repurposed for nuclear oversight, its equations risk translating simple correlation into malicious intent. I think that's amazing, by the way, and very, very significant. There should have been some safeguard on that system, apart from not sharing it with any of the non-members. It still should have been the case that if the AI infers something, then that something should be checked with more direct evidence. It can't be simply trusted. In the end, okay, it is just an inference. It's not a proof that there is hostile intent. And considering that the consequences of leaking such data could cause a war, it's mind-boggling to think that they didn't have checks and balances in place to control such a thing. Going on, what leading Israeli commentators are saying. Leading Israeli center-right commentator Ben Caspit, of Ma'ariv, says, quote, was Iran's breakthrough to the nuclear weapon actually detected? Probably not. As the supreme leader's order to achieve a military nuclear weapon actually given? Probably not. So why did we go to war? Because there was no choice. They were promoting an Israeli annihilation plan, and we had no choice. October 7th, a cold shower woke up an entire country. All those involved need to understand that anyone who contemplates our destruction will be destroyed. Eyes on the ball and a bullet between the eyes. From now on, every move one of our enemies makes somewhere must be followed by action. Every snake's head that rises must be beheaded. And there is something else. The rare and one-time historical window of opportunity that suddenly opened before us. All of this made the decision to go to war the right one. Netanyahu is currently in euphoria. Unquote. Israeli commentator Nachum Barnea of Yedioth. I think that's Aharonot. Aharonot, something like that. Quote, the decision to start a war was all Netanyahu's. Okay, this is a quote. And here he is, deciding and responsible. All the credit is his. Trump gave Israel the green light to start a war, provided that it does not present America as a partner and responsible. The Trump method does not distinguish between Zelensky's Ukraine and Khamenei's Iran. humiliation along the way is the guarantee of an agreement in the end, unquote. Israeli and New York Times commentator, uh, whose name is Ronan Bergman, from Yedioth Aharonot, quote, the need for the series of assassinations last week emerged as a thought last September among senior officials in Unit 8200, the research division in the intelligence directorate of the Mossad, and other parts of the system. Here I have to point out that a lot of damage has been done in this war to that unit, 8200. It has sustained some missile attacks, that were very serious. And the building of the Mossad was blown up and 3,000 people were lost. But anyway, the trigger, going on with the quote, was the defeat inflicted by the IDF on Hezbollah, followed by the successful attack on Iran and the destruction of its air defense system in October. Now, I know this is a quote, but it's not true that the Iranians experienced the destruction of their air defense system in October. That was a mistaken perception by the Israelis. Going on, followed in December by the collapse of the Assad regime in Damascus and the destruction of its air defense system by the IDF. The sequence of events led many senior Israeli officials to believe that an unprecedented opportunity had arisen, a window of a lifetime to attack Iran. And so the beheading forum, which decided the fates of scientists thousands of miles away, sat down and decided who would be ranked at level A, the highest importance, and who at levels B, C, or D, up at the lowest, unquote. Here's the big picture. Seemingly, Trump had been convinced by Netanyahu, Ron Dermer, and CENTCOM's General Kurilla. Politico reports that Kurilla was instrumental in persuading Trump that DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, was wrong in her assessment that Iran had, quote, no bomb, unquote. Here I want to emphasize, this was not Tulsi Gabbard's assessment alone. She reported this as the consensus of all the U.S. intelligence agencies, including the CIA. Okay, so Kurilla was going against the consensus assessment. It wasn't a case where Tulsi was a lone voice, or it was her personal assessment. Going on, Trump sided with the Israelis, asserting that Iran was, quote, very close, unquote, to having a bomb, and added that he, quote, didn't care what she thinks, unquote. Okay, again, it wasn't what she thought. It was what they collectively thought. Trump did speculate out loud the day before the sneak 13th of June that an Israeli attack on Iran, quote, could speed up a deal, unquote. I mean, Trump is wacky. The way he thinks about things is absolutely wacky. Why would it speed up a deal? Unless there was a defeat, why would it speed up a deal? If there was failure, it would mean that there would be no deal until the end. Who makes a deal with perfidious people who you can't have an ounce of trust in. There's little doubt going on with the quote that Syria's unexpectedly sudden, going on with the article, there's little doubt that Syria's unexpectedly sudden fall galvanized the neocons to imagine they might quickly repeat the exercise in Iran. This is why, too, so much emphasis is being laid on assassinating the supreme leader. When Iran did not collapse, when the Iranian system rebooted itself unexpectedly, swiftly, and when Iran's retaliatory strikes on Israel began, the pro-Israeli bloc panicked and exerted tremendous pressure on Trump for the U.S. to enter the war on Israel's behalf. And Trump, being the weak person that he is, and having the evidence that what the Israelis said was happened was being contradicted by reality, he did the opposite of what he should have done. He should have been repelled by their failure. And he should have said, "You made this bed, now you sleep in it." That's what he should have said. Why would he cave to the pressure when they showed that their judgment was incorrect? Why would he bail them out when they failed? What kind of decision maker rewards failure? This left Trump facing a terrible dilemma, having to choose between the sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, either to alienate his MAGA support, who voted for him precisely to prevent the U.S. joining another forever war, thus likely causing a GOP loss at the midterms. By the way, the GOP was moving towards loss of the midterm anyway because of all the other stupid things that Trump was doing. But of course, this just about sealed his fate, or actually what it does is it will cause him to pursue the course of action that many of us have been expecting him to pursue, specifically to do his best to rig the midterm elections in his favor and destroy democracy entirely. Going on with the article, though, to prevent the U.S. joining another forever war, thus likely causing a GOP loss at the midterms, or to alienate his ultra-rich Jewish donors, such as Miriam Adelson, whose money holds sway over Congress and whose resources are harnessed by the deep state to pursue their mutual interests with the Israeli firsters, who would turn against him. And then Larry says, shades of Iraq and the role of Colin Powell in that particular debacle. And that's the end of that article. A very good piece of analysis by Alistair. Okay, I thought. It really lets you know what was going on behind the scenes. I think extremely illuminating. Any comments, Dee?
No, I thought it was very good as well.
Yeah. Very, very enlightening. And very important. Robert says, I stand with people who want peace on both sides of this conflict. Yes. Evelyn says, hi, everyone. The Earl of Laurel says, I stand with regime change in Israel. We certainly need that. Robert Copeland says, there's a member of the State Assembly here in California that supports the bombing on the 3 nuclear bases in Iran by the name of Carl DeMaio. Well, I'm sure he's not the only one who supports it. There are many in the United States who support it. Okay, by the way, there's a very good reason why you should not support it. And that very good reason is that there are more like 10, nuclear bases up in Iran, not just those three. So even knocking out those three doesn't accomplish the objective. All it does is make Iran even angrier and incline them far more strongly to getting a nuclear weapon. It was stupid to attack only three, but why could they attack only three? Because the truth is, we didn't have the resources to attack all 10. That's
Hmm.
why we attacked only three. So it was another case where the means we had to do an attack and to fight a war was inadequate to win that war. When are we going to realize that if our means of attack, is inadequate, we shouldn't be attacking at all? We should be going home. Evelina says, shame on Grossi. More than shame on Grossi. I mean, that guy should be flayed alive. Sorry about that. Evelina Pont says, just read another assassination attempt in a Tehran residential building by Israel. True stint lasts 5 minutes. Yeah, I know. And there's Steve Gonzo under the heading of Steve G2 says new. 130 Iranians arrested across the U.S. in the past week. 670 now in ICE custody. Yes. But I'm sure we can't have too much of an idea who they were because we know ICE is just arresting people. They're just arresting people and not giving them any due process. So we don't know who they have or whether they're agents or not. I mean, they're just making a show of things. And they're not doing it with a great deal of competence either. Anyway, let's go on to our next piece. Let us move along here because we still have a lot left for tonight. A lot of very illuminating stuff to go on. Please do share, like, and subscribe this because we need way more people yet. This is too important to have only 39 folks here, as good as that is. So, next one is another piece by Larry Johnson called The War in Iran is Not Over. D, please take it away.
Okay. The war on Iran is not over. 25 June 2025 by Larry C. Johnson. This tweet. Donald J. Trump. Breaking news. I was shocked to hear that the state of Israel, which has just had one of its greatest moments in history, and is strongly led by Bibi Netanyahu, is continuing its ridiculous witch hunt against the great wartime Prime Minister, Bibi. And we just went through hell together, fighting a very tough and brilliant longtime enemy of Israel, Iran. And Bibi could not have been better, sharper, or stronger in his love for the incredible Holy Land.
Oh, God, I hate that.
I know. Anybody else would have suffered losses, embarrassment, and chaos. Bibi Netanyahu was a warrior, like perhaps no other warrior in the history of Israel. And the result was something that nobody thought was possible. A complete elimination of potentially one of the biggest and most powerful nuclear weapons anywhere in the world, and it was going to happen soon. We were fighting literally for the survival of Israel, and there is nobody in Israel's history that fought harder or more completely than Bibi Netanyahu. Despite all this, I just learned that Bibi has been summoned to court on Monday for the continuation of his long running. He has been going through this horror show since May 2020. Unheard of. This is the first time a sitting Israeli prime minister has ever been on trial. Potentially motivated case. Quotation concerning cigars, a Bugs Bunny doll, and numerous other unfair charges, in order to do him great harm. Such a witch hunt for a man who has given so much is unthinkable to me. He deserves much better than this, and so does the state of Israel. Bibi Netanyahu's trial should be cancelled immediately, or a pardon given to a great hero who has done so much for the state. Perhaps there's no one that I know who would have worked in better harmony with the President of the United States, me, than Bibi Netanyahu. It was the United States of America that saved Israel, and now it is going to be the United States of America that saves Bibi Netanyahu. This travesty of justice cannot be allowed.
I'm sure glad that justice was in scare quotes there.
Yeah,
That was very appropriate.
I don't know why Iran agreed to the ceasefire, but it did. Iranian leaders, in my opinion, are frighteningly naive. Some apparently believe that they can achieve a legitimate negotiated deal with Donald Trump. I suggest the Ayatollah and IRGC commanders read Donald Trump's Truth Social posting regarding Bibi Netanyahu. See image above. Despite Trump's temper tantrum on Monday, when he dropped the F-bomb complaining about the ignorance of Iran and Israel, he still has his lips firmly planted on Bibi's backside and will likely look for a pretext to continue the war with Iran. Well, there is no doubt that Israel inflicted some serious damage on Iran by killing scores of military leaders and nuclear scientists. Iran hit Israel far harder, considering the following facts. Israel has one international airport, Ben Gurion. Iran has 29 international airports. By closing Ben Gurion, Iran cut off Israel's access to commercial air traffic. Israel hit, oops, no, it's running away.
Sorry.
No, that happens to me too.
Okay, there it is.
How about seaports? Israel only has two seaports that handle container ships, Haifa and Ashdod. Iran forced the closure of Haifa and was on its way to doing the same to Ashdod.
By the way, there was another attack on Ashdod last night.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how serious the damage was, but I think it was serious. Okay, please go on.
Iran, by contrast, has 8 principal ports on the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Port of Shahid Raji, Bandar Abbas Complex, Bandar Abbas General Shipping, Shabahar, direct access to Indian Ocean, Bandar Khomeini, Bandar Bashar, Parsian, and Hamas. None were forced to suspend operations. If Iran had shuttered Ashdod, Israel would have faced the prospect of significant shortages of essential items, including food and energy.
Okay,
Israel,
okay. If that attack from last night was as significant as I think it was, they might now be in the situation that Ashdod is shuttered. But we'll have to learn more about that as we move forward and see whether that's true or not. Okay, please go on.
Israel would have been compelled to rely on military airports for resupply. But it appears those airfields were hit by Iranian missiles and suffered some damage. The extent of the destruction is unknown. thanks to the efficiency of Israeli sensors. Iran also hurt Israel's ability to refine oil at the Haifa refinery, operated by Bazan Group, formerly Oil Refineries Limited, located in Haifa Bay, with a capacity of approximately 197,000 barrels per day, about 9 million tons annually. Iran reportedly hit and severely damaged the Haifa refinery. Israel has one other refinery at Ashdod, owned by Paz Oil Company, based in Ashdod with a capacity of about 108,000 barrels per day, about 5.4 million tons annually. I have seen no reports about Iranian attacks on the facility at Ashdod. Had this war continued, Israel likely would have faced an unprecedented economic crisis if it lost its two main container ports and its refineries, because Israel's air defense system had been rendered inoperable and Iran continued to demonstrate the ability to hit critical infrastructure. Israel could have faced a genuine existential threat. The IAEA director, Rafael Grossi, is in panic. During an interview with a French TV station, he admitted the IAEA has lost the ability to monitor Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles following the recent escalation between Israel and Iran.
And he has no one to blame but himself.
Exactly. I think Iranian officials now realize they were played for fools by the IAEA. Circumstantial evidence points to IAEA as the source that provided the names, addresses, and phone numbers of the Iranian nuclear scientists that were murdered by Israeli operatives. Iran is taking steps to end its relationship with the IAEA, according to Eureka News. The Iranian parliament approved a bill on Wednesday to suspend cooperation with the IAEA.
Okay, so there it is. Okay, the Majlis did approve the bill.
Alireza Salimi, a member of the Iranian parliament's presidency, stated that the decision would be referred to the Supreme National Security Council for approval. He also said that agency inspectors would be banned from entering the country and that sanctions would be imposed on those who allowed them in. Quote, the International Atomic Energy Agency did not even formally condemn the attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, so it has lost its international credibility, said Mohammad Bagar Ghalibaf, Speaker of the Parliament. He also stressed that the country intends to continue working on peaceful nuclear energy, despite the threats. Quote, Iran will be more ready and prepared than ever. Our hands is on the trigger, and we will respond with overwhelming force to any aggression, he stated. Grossi is throwing his own version of a temper tantrum, telling Eureka News. Iran has an obligation to cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency on its nuclear program, its Director General Rafael Grossi told France 2 on Wednesday. In detail, the senior official stated that Iran's cooperation with the agency, quote, is not a favor. It is a legal obligation as long as Iran remains a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. In light of the events of the last 12 days, Iran would be entirely justified to withdraw from the NPT. I wonder if Russia and China are considering their cooperation with IAEA. Russia's Sergei Lavrov made the same observation as Mohammad Bagar Ghalibaf, harshly criticizing the IAEA's failure to denounce the Israeli and U.S. attacks on Iran's nuclear plant. While Trump is confident that Iran will return to the negotiating table, I remain skeptical.
I have to interrupt here. I have no idea why Trump is confident that they're going to return to the negotiating table.
They were on the table. They were negotiating. They were seated there.
They were seated there, and he screwed them royally. 6 ways come Sunday.
Right.
Why would they ever negotiate with him again?
Exactly.
Can't be trusted. He's not agreement capable.
No, he's not.
He's insane while Trump is confident. He's insane to be confident.
Exactly. It makes no sense.
It makes absolutely no sense. Sit down with Steve Witkoff again. What is Witkoff going to tell him? Is he going to say, trust me?
Right. Waste time.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was in the very beginning, the skepticism at first with Iran, with talking with the USA, because in the past, they spent a long time coming up with agreements and all this time. And then the next thing you know, the US, like with the last agreement, and when Trump came in, and the last thing was, it was gone. So you can do all these things, spend all these hours, and then the US is going to end up stabbing you in the back. Why even bother? Why waste your time?
Yep, it's ridiculous.
Okay. Yeah, and I remain skeptical that Iran is willing to sit down with Steve Witkoff and agree to halt all uranium enrichment. That is such stupidity. Given the perfidy of the IAEA and the unlawful action of Israel and the United States, Iranian officials would be fools to entertain such talks.
They would be.
That they would be. That's my talk. That's my opinion. We will see what Iranian officials say this week. It's so ridiculous. Why would, like you say, why would they even bother?
Why would they even bother?
They never left the table. I am posting 3 video chats, 2 recorded yesterday and 1 today. The first is with Waqazi Ali, a Pakistani gentleman. We discuss some of the interesting nuances governing relations between Iran and Pakistan. Although Pakistan reportedly stated it was prepared to provide Iran with a nuclear weapon, Mr. Ali explained to me why that was unlikely to happen.
Okay, well, that may be not so likely to happen, but reportedly there was a statement either yesterday or today that Putin had suggested supplying them with nuclear warheads.
Yeah, yeah, so they've got a lot of support.
Okay, keep going.
I recorded a monologue late yesterday discussing the implications of the war for Iran's future relations with China and Russia. It was posted this morning.
Yeah, I think I saw that monologue.
Last, I filled in for Danny Davis, who was on vacation this week in Europe. I interviewed Scott Horton, author of Provoked, and we had a lively discussion.
Yeah, the discussion was lively because uh, um, Scott Horton thinks that there was substantial damage done to uh, the bases, uh, uh, the Iranian bases. He doesn't see them as completely obliterated, but he thinks that the entrances and exits to them were completely sealed. Okay, so that they are not usable any longer. Uh, okay, I think that Larry has disagreed with that rather strongly, but Scott Horton was on with Crystal and Sager today, taking that particular position, And for some reason, Crystal and Sager believed him rather than believing uh, uh, somebody, like Larry Johnson. I personally think that Larry is far more likely to be correct
Mm-hmm.
than Scott Horton. But anyway, that's another issue. Uh, I think the role of the IAEA in this was amazing. Just
Mm-hmm.
amazing, reprehensible, stupid. I think they jeopardized the very existence of the IAEA and the existence of the NPT, you know, the existence of the treaty. I mean, why should people be involved in a treaty when, there's no enforcement mechanism in the treaty that you can count on? I mean, it's gone. It's just, I mean, after how many years? 50 years or 40 years? It's ridiculous that it's gone. I mean, who is this guy, Grossi? I mean, what was his
Mm-hmm.
background? I mean, what was his background? Raphael Grossi. Let's look him up. He's the former Argentine ambassador to Austria. Okay, Raphael Mariano Grossi is Catholic. He's publicly discussed his faith and its influence on his work, particularly in his meetings with religious leaders like Pope Francis. So that's somehow motivated him to leak confidential information to Israel. I
Makes no
doubt.
sense.
Yes. Okay, I doubt that. Anyway, anyway, we have. Oh, Madeline has checked in. That's very interesting.
It's very good. Get Madeline's voice and opinion on things.
Yes, she has come in with both feet. She says, "What a crock! That's Trump to a T." Evelyn says, "Anyone else think that trial is nothing but a farce?" Yeah, I think it's a farce. That means Israel also continues some bombing on Iran. I know. And the Iranians continue to retaliate. Evelina says Madeline and R. Hoffman and vice versa. Madeline says Trump sabotaged uh, um, the negotiations. And Madeline says, Robert Copeland, you could say that. Indeed, some ceasefire we've got. They have consistently shown over 30 years they don't want nuclear weapons. And for many years, the U.S. ignored that and distorted that statement. Absolutely correct. The NPT was rolled out in 1970, like I said, 55 years. 55 years ago. There it was, 50 years ago. And now confidence in the IAEA is destroyed by some fool who
Mm-hmm.
thought he was doing a solid for peace by leaking information to Israel. What?
I know.
What a
It's
moron.
crazy.
Okay, let's get into the heart of the show now, which is a video by Alistair Crook. On the Iran-Israel ceasefire inside the 12-day war and Trump's peace deal. And this is an interview by Nima of Alistair Crook. Okay, Nima is one of the best, okay, at interviews. He's always very calm, always very pleasant, and he asks questions that very often get to the bottom of things. So let us, well, we're already sharing this, so let's get this up on full screen, and we'll be stopping it from time to time. Let me get back to the very beginning.
What I'm about to share started with a disturbing trend in my practice. Many of my patients were experiencing unexplained fatigue, stubborn bloating, brain fog, weight management struggles, all pointing to one overlooked organ, the liver. Your liver is mission control for nearly every vital function in your body, from energy and metabolism to immunity and detox.
Where was the skip on this one? I don't know. There should be a skip, but I never saw it. I don't know what happened with this one, folks. But let me push it to the end. And let me get back my video. No, this is really screwing me up. Now let me get this back again. Let me go back to the beginning. Okay. Okay, hang on a second. This will resolve itself quickly now. Oh, good. Let's go from here. I missed this.
A few days earlier, some days earlier, I mean, what happened? We were suddenly at war. It took everyone, everyone was thinking, what's going on? We're suddenly, it seems America and Israel are about, and Iran are going to go to war. And we had no great sense of this, beforehand. And it took people, I think, a bit by surprise. But that again was part of the deceit, because what we'd seen in the IAEA, that is the international agency that supervises the nuclear file, which under Grossi, who's the Director General, what we saw was a sudden last-minute build-up, which took place first on the 6th of June, but ultimately on the 12th of June. And what was it? It was largely generated or triggered by the AI, the artificial intelligence system that is used by IAEA. And the system is quite interesting. It's called Mosaic, but it belongs to Palantir. You might have heard of Palantir. It is originally conceived in order for counter-terrorist insurgency fighting. So what it does is it doesn't actually, look at facts on the ground. It actually projects and infers and imputes motive to people on the basis of what? Things like what social platform they go on, how they dress, who their circle of friends are, what is the pattern of their telephone calls, and so on. And that's how it works. I remember in Iraq, I was astonished at one point when the Americans were targeting people using this. They used it in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's used, of course, in Gaza. That is another, I don't know if it's exactly that program.
So, in other words, at first, the Palantir system was used for counterinsurgency work. It didn't have the content that would be relevant to conflicts, such as the Israeli-Iranian conflict. In other words, for that, the system had to develop, some new content. So, the question immediately arises, what was the track record of that system? Okay, in the first place, to what extent was it accepted, as authoritative at the IAEA? And what kind of testing, did it undergo for reliability, and accuracy? Or were the people at the IAEA simply overwhelmed by the fact that it was an AI system and, the wonders of AI and so on?
But another program from Palantir that works quite closely with 8200 organization in Israel was the one that was sort of selecting Palestinians for assassination based on, whether their son's WhatsApp group was playing football with Hamas members or whatever. So this suddenly came up, and it suggested a huge acceleration in the Iranian program.
The answer is simple. By supporting family businesses, you provide stability on the home front for the
imputed, inferred from 400 million data points of all sorts, as I say, of those. And that seemed to suggest that it's a sudden acceleration. And then on the 12th, the day before, the IEA, if you like, agreed a resolution condemning Iran and saying it was in breach of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal dating back to 2015. So this was the pretext for the next day.
So why would there be a sudden surge, acceleration? Well, maybe because the negotiations with the United States weren't going very well. In other words, when the negotiations with the United States actually started with Iran, what they heard from Witkoff was that it was okay with the United States for them to enrich to 3.67%. And so the Iranians were willing to settle for that because that's what they had under JCPOA also. Okay, so they were happy to negotiate on that basis, but they were very clear to the Americans and say, it has to be at least that. We're not going to go, we're not going to talk, okay, on any other basis. That's a red line for us. The Iranians said that to Witkoff at the very start of the negotiations. Okay, and so negotiations were going forward for what, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, 5 rounds. Then suddenly the United States comes back, oh, we don't want to allow you any enrichment at all. A total change, okay, in the position of the United States. So if that's going to be the case, why won't, the Iranians suddenly accelerate the speed of their enrichment to 61%? I mean, they had every reason to do so because they were entering a very tough part, the negotiation. And as they had said themselves, they wanted to be enriching to 61% so they could use that as leverage. So why wouldn't they think, well, the more uranium I have at 61%, the more likely it is that I'm going to be able to get them to back off. I know I would think in those terms if I were them. Anyway, let's continue.
Pretext was given to Israel by the IEA with the compliance of the board, including particularly the European three, who had already promised at that point to try and raise a resolution for snapback sanctions against Iran. And the other part of this thing, of course, is that this artificial intelligence targeting mechanism was actually being informed to the Israelis. The Iranians have got direct intelligence that much of the data was being passed by Grossi to Israeli Mossad officials. And therefore the thing was being managed, if you like. This whole thing was being managed, and the pretext given for, if you like, this attack. Now, did Trump know this? Did the American team know this? I have no evidence, but it seems very likely that since this was going on for months and being coordinated with the United States, and of course, all that talk about, that he was stopping Netanyahu. He spoke toughly. There was an argument with Netanyahu. It turns out it was nonsense because it was all, this whole thing, the pretext was conceived in the IEA, the pretext was handed to Israel, and then Israel did its attack. And I think, if you like, to a certain extent, I don't know whether Trump directly or his team was somewhat suckered in by this presentation of AI to suggest that there was a sudden, immediate, and Iran was very close, therefore, to the possibility of making a weapon. Now, what was interesting was, that when I say pulled in or suckered, I'm saying that, what we saw was that he stuck completely with that line that, no, they're very quick. I mean, they're speeding towards a bomb. And he dismissed Tulsi Gabbard and her, if you like, compilation from the main intelligence services said there's no evidence of this, and it's agreed with the Europeans and all of the other sort of Five Eyes states. We have no evidence of moving it, no evidence of a change in the Supreme Leader's fatwa.
Here's how to own the libs in 2025 and get a free gold coin. Starting this month, the 1776 MAGA resurgence
about a nuclear weapon, and that was dismissed. But the difference between the two is Tulsi Gabbard's was based on evidence. It was evidence-based. I mean, solid intelligence, which had to be checked and had to be made sure it was accurate and not false, against an AI system, Mosaic, which was saying something very different. Now, was that discrepancy addressed? It seems not, because Gabbard was actually excluded from all of the discussions.
Right, but as I keep emphasizing, it wasn't simply Tulsi Gabbard's estimate. It was the consensus of all of the intelligence agencies. So Trump decided to trust an AI system that he had no deep understanding of, instead of trusting the consensus of a whole bunch, of intelligence agencies. Now, whether Trump understood that when he was being given the consensus, of all of the agencies, that he understood that meant that there were no agencies dissenting from the consensus. He was getting a unanimous opinion from all of the intelligence agencies. If it wasn't a unanimous opinion, then Tulsi would have given him the dissenting agencies and what they thought and why they thought it. So the fact that there were no dissenting agencies, including the CIA, and that there were some 17 intelligence agencies involved, that's a very, very heavy weight on one side of the equation. And on the other side of the equation, what you have is an AI system. And what is the track record for the AI system in terms of its inferences and the correctness, of its inferences? Was Trump actually given, any information on the track record of success of the AI system? I'll bet he wasn't. I'll bet he wasn't. He was just given a snazzy interpretation of it, and he just fell for it like a ton of bricks. Going on.
About Iran when it came up to. Then what happened on the time, and this is really important because, again, it's now very clear that this was a pattern, and the pattern we're seeing. I think we're going to see more of this, but this was a pattern. The decapitation of the senior military line commanders of the military, who were meeting in a sort of a room to plan an exercise, which was advertised, in which Israel would have known about it, a naval exercise, I think it was. So most of the leaders were there, and they were taken out in the room. I can't remember exactly how many it was now, but I think it's about 12 now been either killed in that room or subsequently. And then there was the assassinations, parallel assassinations of Iranian scientists who were killed in their home with their families, targeted for being involved in the nuclear program in some way. Then the other parts to this complex was a complex operation. All in one day was, first of all, disabling the air defenses in the central and the western part of Iran, the neighbor of Syria and Iraq. I always get my left and right in the wrong way around. But in the area close to Syria and Iraq, which was where they were.
Khuzestan. It's called Khuzestan.
Yeah, Khuzestan. There. And they disabled this, and they used electronic warfare. It looks as if it was some form of cyber attack. And it took out the system.
Eating too much salt causes hypertension, right? Nope. What about too much bacon and red meat? Nope. It's actually
It was restored after about 8 hours, but during that period, it was disabled. But the intent of all of this and the background, which needs to be understood, was the idea was that the shock, the sudden shock of the decapitation, the assassination, the evidence that Israel could just kill A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on in single strikes to their home and so on, coupled with the loss of the air defense system, which was taken down. All of this would provoke the collapse of the state, of the entire state, would paralyze it, it would demoralize it, people wouldn't know what to do, there would be mayhem, and the state would collapse. And the model for this was Hezbollah, the decapitation strike on Hezbollah, and also the sense very much the American neocons have been very much taken by what happened in Syria, in the way in which with Syria, at one moment when Assad left Syria, really Syria imploded. I mean, it just fell apart. I know Syria a bit, and it was a shock to me how quickly it was. But they were full of this and believed that Iran would just collapse like a house of cards on the first day. And that then, there would be a color revolution, and that's why they infiltrated the groups to do, the standard thing, car bombs, disruption of civil life, blowing up the press and information services, and so the state couldn't recoup.
Interesting to note how diabolical this all was, and how carefully planned. It was. It was pre-planned. They activated the plan at this point in time. But the plan was conceived, and its details were conceived actually during the Biden administration. I mean, it was in process for some long time, and it was very complex. The problem with plans that are very complex is that if one or two things go wrong, the whole system is disrupted, and the plan actually fails. One of the factors in disrupting the plan here was that the Russians came in at the beginning of disruption of the air defense system of Iran. The Iranians turned to the Russians for help and getting the system underway again. And the Russians helped them. That's why they were able to recover after 8 hours, and then to turn back and to pay attention to the retaliation,
to create a sense of chaos amongst the Iranian people, they thought, which lead, and that's why they kept talking about capitulation, talked about I'm waiting for surrender, complete surrender, because they thought they believed, and Trump believed, and I think Israel believed that this would bring about complete surrender of the state of Iran. And then what happened was just the opposite. Iran rebounded very quickly. It restored the air defense system within 8 hours, got it back, restored the whole system that had been damaged by this process. And then it rebounded. New people were appointed to the military, and it moved smoothly towards the next stage, which was confronting Israel militarily. And of course, I mean, there were occasions with, the drones were being fired from within, mostly within Iran, some of them being fired from up in the Caspian direction, from Azerbaijan, where the Israelis have a base. And these were different drones. These were drones with which were attack drones, which were capable of direct, if you like, bombing of infrastructure. So most of what we saw, in fact, was not after the first 8 hours, or at least, but even before. We weren't seeing there was no footage of Israeli aircraft over Iran at this time. What we do see is parts of sort of rocket stages and booster stages of Israeli rockets like the Sparrow rocket lying in Iraq and Syria. And it looks as if the Israelis mostly did standoff attacks, launched attacks, standoff attacks in that way against Iran. And then they were using, first of all, the drones that were being assembled by the infiltrated terror cells. Some of it was just car bombings and simple attacks. Some of that was attacks on the air defense system. And as I say, the other element. And so what we see of videos, mostly are videos from these quite heavy, big drones. Iran has shot down 3 of them at various times that were over. And we don't really have any sort of evidence. You know, Israel and America talks blithely that, you know, there's no air defenses. Iran is just open, you know, it is defenseless and we can go. Just not true. It's just another one of the deceptions that we have of these many deceptions.
Okay, so that's a point on which there is quite a lot of disagreement. Lots of American sources, Western sources, insist until now that the air defenses, of Iran were ineffective. You know, after the 8 hours, you know, of the recovery time, that Iran remained very vulnerable, you know, to the Israeli air attacks. But according to Alistair, most of what's happened, since that time has been long distance attacks by the Israelis, missile attacks on Iran, you know, by planes, you know, air to ground missiles, that sort of thing. You know, after the first days of internal sabotage, and drone attacks from you know, from close by areas. I don't know what the truth is here. I tend to trust you know, what Alistair has to say, because his internal Iranian sources are very, very good, and his knowledge of West Asia, of most of the nations of West Asia, is encyclopedic. And he just has contacts all over, and is in contact, you know, with those people continuously. So when he says the air defense system of Iran, you know, is largely intact after the first 8 hours, I have some faith, in what he has to say. I don't think it was completely effective, because after all, if it was completely effective, then why would the Russians be hurrying to send more S-400 systems to Iran, at this time? Now, I think probably the Iranians were relying too much on their own systems and did not want to accept the help from Russia that they really needed to be completely effective. But I think that in light of what they've experienced, next time they're going to be, you know, a lot more careful, about what is going on. I also wanted to add a point, you know, that I missed a little earlier, okay, in relation to the assassinations. I think the Iranians have also begun to think now in terms of assassinations themselves. I don't think they have the kind of information the Israelis have had about, where all the leaders are. But just a case in point, last night, I believe it was, there was an attack by the Iranians on the foreign ministry, okay, of Israel. And they destroyed the building where the foreign ministry sits. And according to reports, the foreign minister of Israel was killed. So the Iranians then were successful in killing one of the key leaders, okay, of Israel. And I think in the coming days, if the ceasefire doesn't continue, if we have these interruptions in the ceasefire, I think the Iranians will be targeting more and more, the leaders of Iran. There was an attack also today on the area, where, close to the residence, okay, of Bibi Netanyahu. And I don't know how successful, the attack was, but there was a report that he was spirited away into a bunker, underground. So he is now in hiding, as the Ayatollah has been himself. So I think we're getting a little poetic justice here as, time goes on.
That have taken place to hoodwink the American and European public and the Israeli public too. So that was the background to the actual, as far as, one can piece it together. I can't vouch for all of it because I wasn't there, but that seems to me to be a rough scenario of what happened up until then the second day, when everything kicked into the war mode, into the missiles started flying, and we were into a war mode.
This is the quickest way to clear out stuck poop.
I have
Folks,
to poop, but it feels stuck. Stop!
I can't help those. I don't know when they come in.
And when we came to a war mode, as you mentioned, how everything was somehow getting to this sort of moment, what has happened during the war? 12 days of war between the two countries. They have never fought against each other directly before. And suddenly we see Donald Trump coming out and saying that we have a ceasefire, we're going to have a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. What has happened during these days of fighting each other that brought this sort of idea to the Trump administration that plan, that, as you mentioned, was not working and they have to find other solutions?
Well, first of all, the collapse of the state didn't happen. And that was the most important element that we're talking about. I think the second element was the decision taken by Trump then to do an attack on these three nuclear sites, Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordo. And that, again, seems to have been long planned. It's not something that came out of the blue, it seems to be, and that's what the American officials also say, that it had been quite long planned. Now, what happened was that I have been told, and I think it's true, that the Trump administration gave forewarning to Iran of this attack, probably through the Russians or through the Swiss embassy, I don't know. But they gave forewarning that this attack was coming, and that I think that I don't have evidence for this, I have to say, but it is my supposition is that the Russian advice to Iran was, Trump says it's once and done. They just want to do this and then it's over. It'll be the attack, finish. And the Russians said, just let it happen. Don't try and stop it. There's no point. Just let it happen. It's better just to let it go. And so Iran let it go. I mean, there was almost no indication of air defenses or guns firing or anything during that attack on Sunday on the three sites. It's still highly.
Okay, so that's a very key point. The Iranians didn't even try to defend against the bombers. I think it's an interesting question about what would have happened if they had tried to defend against them. The Iranians have some S-400 systems. It's a likely assumption that they have them around the nuclear sites, okay, and the missile sites. They have a good many S-300 systems that were upgraded by their scientists. And they have what they think are equivalents to the Russians' S-500 systems as well. Now, I don't know if the Iranian equivalents are really equivalents to the Russians' S-500 systems. I have some degree of doubt, okay, about that. But if they're anything like the capability, S-400 systems and S-500 systems have a chance of knocking the B-2 bombers out of the sky. So it's significant that the Iranians did not attempt, to do that. Because what would have happened if they had actually knocked them out of the sky and they had gone down with, the MOPS bombs in them? That would have introduced some chaos into the situation shortly. The MOPS bombs, may not have ignited in that situation, exploded in that situation. They certainly wouldn't have hit their targets. Altogether, in the three facilities, I understand the number of MOPS bombs that were used were some 16 bombs across the three installations, something like 12 of which were dropped on Fordo alone. I've also heard that the United States produces only 20 such bombs per year. 20 of the gravity bombs per year. So the interesting question is, if that attack had been foiled by knocking the bombers out of the sky, and remember, they are slow airplanes, relatively speaking. They only move at 650 miles per hour. The missiles that would be attacking them are much, much faster. Even the S-400 systems, they're not hypersonic, but they're much faster. Okay. If they had been successful in knocking them out of the sky, and even now, does the United States have any more of the bombs left over for other purposes or other situations? Or has Trump, literally blown his load? I don't know, but I think that's a question of some interest to me anyway.
Controversial, exactly what was hit and what wasn't. I think there's considerable doubt whether actually B-2 bombers flew over, but they may well have done. But there is no indication there's no indication that any serious damage was done to any of those three sites. We also saw that for...
Okay, now that's based on Alistair's internal sources, as well as articles, that have appeared in sources like that. I mean, Alistair has heard from inside of Iran that the damage to those bases was not very serious, and that's a big contrast to what the Americans are saying about the success of the attacks, even discounting what Trump is saying. Some of the military authorities who were being a little more careful in their assessment of what had gone on, they're certainly putting forth that very serious damage was done to their sides. While Alistair's verdict is that no serious damage was done, at all. I tend to trust Alistair in this.
4 days before this American attack, Iran was busy filling the entrances with soil. There were long lines of trucks going up, soil was being placed in the entrances. And I think this was done not really to block it off, but to limit, if you like, to cushion and to absorb any explosions that take place at the time, because soilers are very good. But we have, 3 neat holes on one ridge and 3 or 2 visible ones on another ridge, which is supposed to be under the ridges that the main holes of the centrifuges lie. Now, I'm not an expert in this, but the experts that I listen to on this say this is not consistent with a GBU-57 bomb being dropped, because if they wanted to go down, you wouldn't have 3 separate, if you like, penetrations of the ridge. You'd have one into which they drop a second and a third, or however many bombs, so that they went down and down and down. And that didn't happen. And so the general view, now confirmed, I think, the CNN and the Americans, there's reporting just before I came on, I saw, that top secret reports say there was very little damage done to Fordo. I mean, we know pretty clearly almost nothing was done to Natanz. I mean, Natanz had already been damaged by the Israelis on the surface, but not done at, I think the centrifuges are between probably 60 and 80 meters below the upper structure of Natanz. Natanz is an old structure, and Isfahan too was not really damaged. So Trump has gone all out in the Americans, absolutely obliterated Fordo, the whole program. These 3 strikes have completely, absolute success, brilliant work by the Air Force, the American Air Force. I mean, that's the end of the program. And he was even hinting, now is the time for Iran to surrender and write, we'll have a meeting and you can write your sign on a surrender document. And this is a narrative which really...
Folks, that kind of meeting is not going to take place. It is not going to take place because there hasn't been any serious damage, and there's no reason for them to surrender.
Actually, this doesn't seem to be working very well. Today, Trump has doubled down on it in the most bizarre way. He says, the Israelis tell me they've sent their people. They've sent people to Fordo and have been in Fordo and have confirmed that it is completely destroyed. I just, I can't believe that his team allows him to say such nonsense. I know that I've been to Qom. In fact, Fordo is quite close to Qom. It's very adjacent. I mean, I know what that area is like. You don't have, Mossad agents wandering around, just going into nuclear installations like Fordo, which is remote and in a mountain, and the entrances to it, you have to go down and down and down and down to get into the enrichment chambers. I mean, it's just, ridiculous. I don't know why they allow him to say such exaggerated things, because it just undermines everything. So what does this mean?
There's no stopping him from saying exaggerated things. That's just Trump. He'll always say exaggerated things.
Well, what it means is something important for Iran. I listened, by the way, to the Supreme Leader's address on, I think it was a few days earlier, that he did to a huge gathering of Iranians. And it was translated by AI, as I don't understand it. It was the most impressive address, a very clear statement of Iran, where it is, what it is, very articulate, short, to the point. And the effect on people was really dramatic. But he was very clear, no surrender. He said, we will continue with enrichment. What right has the United States to say anything to us about our proposal? What right have they, unprovoked, illegally, to attack the state? And he said, we will continue with enrichment. We will continue with it because we need it for many things, many different projects that we're engaged with. It was a very powerful speech. And if you haven't seen it, you should. And it had a huge impact on the audience. You could see it. But where are we? So therefore, what we have at the end of this theater, because quite clearly this was theater, the Iranians were informed. They let it happen. They allowed it to bomb. They've said nothing beyond. The United States and Israel say it was a huge victory. We've destroyed the nuclear enrichment program, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is rather different. The reality is that it seems quite possible, that's what the Iranian officials are saying, that the enriched uranium was removed from Fordo some days before this advertised attack. And no one knows where it is. Well, Iran does. The Americans and the Israelis are saying, where is it? I mean, I read the Israeli sort of Hebrew press, and they say, yeah, but where is the 450 kilograms of enriched uranium now? We've lost it. And secondly, what I described at the outset about the sort of the joining of the IEA in a sort of subversion of the program with the Americans and with the Europeans has so discredited the IEA, discredited with Russia and China, I should say too, not just with the Iranian people, but with both of those states for different reasons, but the same, and still to this day, grossly hasn't, as I understand it.
When you have these woke revolutions, it requires all of us at some point to say, no, not going to do this.
Condemn the attack on a legitimate enrichment process that was being monitored. He has said nothing. Anyway, that means that I think it's now passed through Parliament and through Duma that the IEA is going to be expelled. IAEA will be expelled. They are not allowed to go anywhere. They said you're not wandering around Bordeaux or Pickaxe Mountain trying to look if it's been hidden there. I don't think they have any ability to do that. They're awaiting they're still in Iran, but awaiting expulsion, which I think is inevitable. It's going to come. I don't think Iran perhaps is going to leave the NPT. First of all, it takes about 3 months to leave it. It's not quick. But there may be reasons, there may be merits in keeping it. So therefore, first of all, I mean, they've survived the attacks on the first day. Iran survived the attacks, the decapitation day. They've survived the Trump attack on the Fordo.
If you can be a part of the NPT and but not have any inspections, then why is Israel not a part of the NPT? All the Israelis would have had to do was to join the NPT and refuse inspections. So, I mean, it seems to me it's inconsistent to be part of the NPT and not have inspections. I don't think the NPT can survive, without having inspections. So I think this is the end of the NPT.
Not too difficult to survive it because it was more theater than real, perhaps. But then, now they are expelling the IAEA, and where is the enriched uranium? And they also say that they have enough centrifuges that they removed before the attacks. So the object, if that was the object, to destroy the nuclear program, hasn't worked. However, before saying this is a great victory, it isn't, because this was just a pretext. This was pretext, and it's important for people who are watching it to understand. As I say, it was planned long ago, and it was part of the long-term plan to destroy Iran and to destroy the revolution, and particularly thereby to undermine and weaken Russia, and also to put China's fuel supply, its oil supply, its energy, security at risk.
Alistair always has his eye on the ball. He always has his eye on the greater configuration of power and on the underlying reason why the United States and Israel might be pursuing certain courses of action.
So it was much more, and it has to be understood in the bigger context. It wasn't just about bombing those sites. It was the bigger context of the absolute determination of the American establishment to keep and to restore, if you like, dollar primacy, trading primacy around the world, because they need to rebalance. The debt is terrible at the moment, and they have a deficit on the capital account, which is bleeding, if you like, out dollars. There's this huge cloud of dollar debt around the world, and they need to reduce that and keep it into balance with the productive capacity of the United States. And so one of the elements of this was the aim was to take control of the Middle East energy and resource supplies so that it could underpin, if you like, the dollar and the American financial system while they try and pull back and reduce the outstanding debt and, if you like, bring manufacturing back to the United States and rebalance the economy. So it has to be seen partly as part of the financial war, as well as the war against Russia.
It's a financial war based on, on misconception. That is, the size of the debt is no problem for us. Doesn't matter how large, the debt is. because the United States is the currency issuer. It can always issue more reserves and more currency to pay back any debts, to pay back any interests. If dollars are scattered, across the world, that is not a problem. So I could go into a longer exposition on this, okay, but we don't have time. It's a characteristic of Alistair Crook, Colonel McGregor, lots of other people who, come out of the judges program, that while they're very good on assessing the balance of power, okay, in international politics, and while they generally stand strongly for resolving conflicts and for peace, they also don't have a good understanding of how the government creates, okay, its money, okay, in order to spend. They don't have a good understanding of the economics attached, okay, to that. And therefore, their calculations about whether the United States is somehow going to collapse or not because it is going to run short of money, their thinking on that subject is completely at variance with how things actually work. Now, there are many politicians that share their perceptions, and that creates a possible situation where the politicians in Congress can make very severe mistakes and do very stupid things that there's no reason to do. So the false perceptions of people have to be countered, including their false perceptions. But when I go over their work, I have to strongly state that when it comes to the debt, when it comes to the deficit, they don't know what they're talking about.
I mean, Iran is a key pivot to the north-south corridor, also now to the east, the east-west, the Chinese east-west corridor, but also now to the
East-West corridor is the Belt and Road Initiative, of course.
Corridor, the train link at least, linking Iran straight through to.
You get it included.
It's buffering, unfortunately, now. And the buffering is just sheer time waste. I don't think I can do anything about that. It will stop when it wants to stop. Let me see if I can do something about it.
For free. No fine print, no hoops to jump through, and yes.
There we go.
To China. So it's very important in that context. And so what's happened, essentially, that brought about it to a ceasefire was what was happening in Israel. Israel not having succeeded in, destroying the state, in decapitating the Iranian state, and was suffering the missile attacks. And the missile attacks started off with older missiles, drones and others, and then moved up to the advanced missiles. And the advanced missiles were with big warheads, 1.5-ton warheads. And
why did the Iranians start off with the older missiles? It was to use up the interceptor missiles, which the Israelis had. The Iron Dome consists of interceptor missiles. David Sling, interceptor missiles. THAAD, interceptor missiles. Arrow 1 and Arrow 2, interceptor missiles. All interceptor missiles. Sometimes, if you do make the interception, of a missile, it may take you 12 of, the interceptor missiles to do so. 12 for one. The interceptor missiles often cost $2 and $3 million. The missiles they're intercepting cost $200 and $300,000. So the Iranians started off with their older missiles to exhaust the supply of interceptor missiles, that Israel had. Then when they went to, their more advanced missiles, which were better at dodging the interceptor missiles anyway, there were fewer of the interceptor missiles they had to cope with. So the more advanced hypersonic missiles got through in greater proportion than would otherwise have been the case. It was
and particularly the ultimate one.
It was estimated, of course, that in the last round of attacks by the Iranians, that 50% of the missiles that they fired in that wave actually got through. 50% actually got through. That's devastating.
Yeshiva was dramatically a hypersonic attack. The Israelis were having less and less success in downing the Iranian missiles, less and less success in downing the Iranian missiles, but they were also using up the air defense interception missiles very fast. They were firing at least 2, but sometimes much more, at drones. And of course, Iran was flooding the area with drones as well as with missiles to confuse and to preempt these incoming air defense systems of Israel. They were suffering heavy damages. No one can tell you how much because there's a complete blackout. You're not allowed to photograph. You're not allowed to go to the military sites. You're not allowed to report what's happening. I mean, it's a complete blackout. But there's no doubt that there are many deaths, many injuries, and also many people who have been displaced by these attacks. But the other part of it, which is not so much mentioned, because we do see a bit of the damage, because the Bedouin in the Negev and so on photograph the incoming sites, even though they're not allowed to. But the other thing is, Israel is a small country. It has only 3 ports. Eilat has been bankrupt and has been closed for some months. Haifa has sustained huge damage. It was, the trading port, and this was supposed to be the corridor, the alternative to the East-West corridor, the corridor from India that the Americans were touting that would go through to Europe, the corridor. And Haifa was to be the pivot linking Europe right through to the east. Well, Haifa is not functioning. Haifa also, its refinery was heavily damaged. Apparently will not be operational for at least a month, maybe longer, who knows. And now Ashdod, in this last round of last salvos from Iran, was heavily damaged. I can't say how much because, there is this news blackout. So maybe it's not so severe. Maybe it is severe. We have to find out. But everything was closing down in Israel.
If it's not so severe today, it can very well be so severe tomorrow. Because, of course, the Iranians have a bead on Ashdod now, and they've hit it once. And if the results show that it's not completely knocked out, they can always come back with another missile with a heavy warhead and destroy the whole thing. If it's not already destroyed, it can be destroyed in the next 2 or 3 days, in the next exchange that breaks the ceasefire.
This brilliant device keeps your home cool in summer, even during heat waves and power outages. It's smaller than a lunchbox, cools any room.
The place was going dead economically. I think they were desperate. And so it was Israel that was in touch with both Iran and with the United States, saying, for God's sake, we need this to stop. I mean, we're desperate for it to stop. So Trump thought that then, I can do one of my famous sort of ceasefires, and it'll be a great victory for the United States and for Trump. And so he proposed this. What he did was, it wasn't proposed anything. He just announced a ceasefire at sort of midnight and said it's going to start 3 minutes later. And then it was later and later and later as the night went on. It was very confusing for those of us trying to follow it, whether the ceasefire had started or it hasn't started or whatever. But he just announced it. So the first point people have to understand is it isn't a ceasefire. A ceasefire is something that has a framework, that has agreements, that has, a procedure attached to it, so everyone knows what is permitted, what is not permitted. That's a ceasefire. I used to make ceasefires in Palestine. I used to have to create them. So I know how detailed they have to be. You have to anticipate everything. There's none of that. There's no framework. There's no real agreement. It's an end of hostilities. That's all. It's not a ceasefire. It's just.
Yeah, the ceasefire is a fake. All Trump did was to announce a cessation of the hostilities, and then he hoped the other two sides, for their own reasons, would go along with the cessation. So to some degree, they have gone along. But there are violations by the Israelis constantly and retaliations by the Iranians constantly. So the war just goes on, but at a lower level of intensity. However, now the Iranians are throwing in the better quality missiles they have, much more accurate. And the payloads, are heavier. So each time there's an exchange, the Israelis lose more and more. And the Iranians are gaining more and more advantage with each of the exchanges. So the Iranians are content to have it this way, and also to have a chance to pull themselves together at the same time.
A brief end of hostilities, and now it seems to have gone into operation, accompanied by very florid language from Trump about how the world is at peace and the world is grateful to the United States and Trump for his great success in doing this. Is this going to last? Is it going to extend? I think both parties are probably quite tired after these 12 days. So I think it will go for a while. But let's not forget, the nuclear issue was just the pretext. The main issue is to destroy Iran. Why? Why so insistent on that? Is because the pro-Israeli group in the United States and the Israelis themselves both believe that you cannot guarantee that Iran will not be able to enrich and eventually move towards the weapon. There's no guarantee, no perfect guarantee for that, because it's once you have the technical knowledge and the people who have the ability to do this, you can't unlearn something, you know it. So the only way finally to stop any threat, as Trump and Israel would see it, of course not everyone agrees with that at all, but the only way to stop it is regime change and to install a pro-Western puppet into Tehran who would ensure that there was never, ever any threat to Israel whatsoever. So even at the moment we're in a pause, even though we're in a sort of period now, perhaps of drawing back, that the threat hasn't gone away. The threat will, and I would say to any Iranians who might be watching it, if there are any, I would say, first of all, don't relax. Don't assume that this is, it's done and gone, finished. We won. Would be a great mistake. You need to build up your defenses. You need to prepare, because it's quite possible this little piece has over, but there may well be another of a different.
Ever wondered what your home looks like from space? Enter your address and get a 360-degree satellite view.
Type coming. And I would say also, is it a win for Iran? Clearly, yes, because.
Okay, let's also consider some other reasons why they've got to have regime change. A very large proportion of the Israelis right now have dreams of what they consider, to be greater Israel. And some of them are looking at maps which extend Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates and north to encompass almost the whole of Syria, and much of Iraq also. And many of the Israeli population have dreams of the Israelis dominating this whole area. And implicitly, they don't care about the populations that live in these areas. They have dreams of not only dominating those areas, but of moving the populations out. The ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from Gaza is only the beginning for them. They're going to want to ethnically cleanse in Lebanon and in parts of Syria, parts of Iraq, too, in order to create the greater Israel that they dream of. They can't do that with a strong Iran. They need an Iran that's a vassal state of the United States in order to do that kind of expansion. So they need regime change for that reason also. It's not only because of the threat of nuclear weapons from Iran, but it's also because of their own dreams of expansion. Now, we're probably talking between 30 and 50% of the Israeli population who share these dreams. So that's a powerful reason why the Israelis will still want to work for regime change inside of Iran, and why the Iranians are not able to relax. On the other hand, it's a good reason for the Iranians not only to not relax, but to defend themselves, but also move to have regime change, inside of Israel, and also move to want to undermine, the Zionist state itself, because it's the arrangement of that state and the apartheid nature of that state and the internal racism which is driving this whole dynamic, of greater Israel. So,
the mystique of Israel has been completely broken by Iranian missiles. Everyone in the region, at least from the region's point of view, thought that, Israel was unassailable, linked supported by the United States with the weapons and forces of the United States, couldn't be, it was just couldn't be, it was invulnerable. And now it's quite clearly vulnerable and was at the point of breaking up because there are lots of pressures inside Israel at the moment. And the question is, what is it, the point? What is it going to do? What was the point of this attack on Iran? Where was it going to take us? Because, what was very clear from Iran was that the whole of the Iranians rallied around the government and around the supreme leader and have come together. And I think second point I would say is, this is an opportunity for Iran. Iran needs to sort of, if you like, re-energize the revolution, to move it, to bring the young people into it. It's not failing, or it hasn't failed, but I think it's been much diverted by the sense that a deal with the West was possible. And I don't think that people will believe that any longer. I think that, siren voice saying, oh, well, the West, we need to do a deal with the West. I think that siren voice is probably stilled. And I think that we will see Iran much more, if you like, tough-minded, hard-nosed about its future and about how to look after itself. But this is an opportunity. And I do think, when I was in Iran recently and I talked to some of the leaders, and I said, what is needed in this period of nihilism, postmodern nihilism, is there needs to be something that lifts, the West and everything out of this very literal thinking, this so-called mechanical rationality, and to take it to a different level of consciousness.
Hi, I'm Brett. And I'm Jonathan. This is Darla. And this is Buddy.
It was what happened in the revolution. And they all said to me, yes, it's so important. And we believe that Iran can play a part, have an intellectual role with Russia and China in this way of working out how the BRICS about Central Asia can, find what it means to be Asia, and to bring in embrace all the components of Iran, which is a very diverse society, as well as Russia is, to how to find a way of giving meaning to what it is to be Russian, what it is to be Iranian in this new era. So I think it does give an opportunity if it's seized, and doesn't go down the road of hoping to do some sort of deal with America. Perhaps that's good politics. I don't know. Maybe it's good politics to what a famous Russian prime minister called strategic procrastination. I don't know if it is, but I think something definitely has changed in Iran, and the change offers a huge opportunity for Iran to really reinvigorate and redefine itself in a very positive way, and needs to do that because the war is not over. It will just find another way of manifesting itself. So when you look at the bigger picture overall, and then I'll shut up. When you look at the bigger picture, you can see some of the things are very important. The statements by Russia and China were absolutely solidly against the American, Israeli, and European aggression against Iran, illegitimate, illegal, against the Charter, against international law, against common morality, etc. both of them very strong. Now that is going to have huge impact on places where you are and others, I think, in the global south will, that Russia and China are standing absolutely squarely about a principle in this respect. So I think that is an important thing. I think Iran has demonstrated very clearly the vulnerability of Israel, and it's also, if you like, punctured the myth of Israeli technical, material superiority, exceptionalism. I don't know what impact that will have within the region. I feel it will have an important impact, but I think it's too soon to really judge that and guess how that is going to turn out. With the United States, it's really more complicated. I think because, as you've probably seen, for the United States, you have there's been a dissonance.
Okay, I think I'm going to stop things here because it's getting late. I do have some part of this still left to go, a little less than 20 minutes. I think this video is very, very important. The thinking of Alistair is extremely broad scope and relates all kinds of things together. So it's worth listening to the rest of this and discussing it as it comes to us. So I'm going to take it up again, on Saturday, this final part of it, from about 48 minutes to the end. But I think so far it's been a brilliant analysis, and exposition. Very, very deep. And the best treatment of the significance of the war that I've seen so far. Okay, so Dee, what did you think of it?
Oh, I thought it was very good. I thought he's, and like I said, he was very good. He presented a lot of information that, the Western media is not going to tell you.
Yeah, I think he presented information they're not going to tell you, but the picture he painted is also something the Western media is not going to talk about.
Exactly.
So
people are so duped in the West.
Yes. So duped. Yes, I entirely agree. Well, we're still doing pretty well. We've got about 40 people here. Let's take care of the last of the comments. Evelina said Trump seemed irked as Israel resumed attack on Iran, also blamed Iran, of course. Was his irritation with Israel real? I think it's real, but it's also superficial. In other words, Trump gets irritated when people don't do what he wants them to do. But when he has commitments to them, he quickly forgets that. He loses his temper. He talks unwisely. But if he has to kiss their ass, the next day he's back kissing their ass. And I think he still thinks that he has to, kiss their ass. Get your Trump daddy wife beater now, says Steve Gonzo. It's interesting. Earl says BDS indeed. Madeline says good night all. Enjoyed listening to the show. Thank you, Madeline. Friar Steve says if the Russians warned Iran, it's just another example of how Putin is running Trump. Didn't Pete Edge say we dropped 20 bombs? No, I think he said we dropped 16 bombs. I think this is just a way to expose our capabilities to Russians and to help Putin. Those bombs should have been dropped on him, not on Iran. If they had been dropped on Putin, then he would have used, first of all, Friar Steve, get it straight. If he had gone over Russia with the B-2s and the B-1s, they would have been knocked out of the sky by the S-500 systems. So there would have been no bombs dropped on Russia. That's number one. Number two, even if they had somehow gotten through, the Russians would have retaliated on our stuff, with their Oreshniks. And we wouldn't have any military bases left on the European continent in that instance. It would be done. The Earl of Lurl says, got to go to bed. Have a good night. Thank you, Earl. And Evelina says, sometimes the debris from intercepted missiles can be lethal. Yes. Israel has some regime change its ultimate goal, but Iran has an ultimate plan too. In the meantime, it will retaliate after each attack. I agree. Iran has an ultimate plan too, and I think that ultimate plan is to create a situation where Israel is no longer a viable state and that it simply fades away. And I think that given what they've already done to Israel, there's a good chance that they can achieve that at this point. If the ports are gone, if the oil facilities are gone, if the economy has no more basis, if the infrastructure, the internal infrastructure is destroyed, what is there left to Israel then? What will the people do? When the airports open, if they can repair Ben Gurion Airport to take them away, millions of them are going to go back where they came from. 2 million Israelis carry Russian passports also. And I don't know how many millions are carriers of US passports or UK passports or continental passports of one kind or another. But I think there are millions that have those also. I think there must be 4 or 5 million of, the 7 million Jews in Israel who can leave. And when only 3 million Israelis are left, how can the state possibly survive? I don't think it will be able to. But I mean, the economy is destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
As it goes forward, it can only exist on the basis of US dollars. Now, maybe the billionaires will continue sending their dollars over there, and maybe they can keep the economy on life support until it's able to recover. But unless they stop the missiles, coming from Iran, they're not going to be able to do anything about that. So how can they stop those missiles? They can only stop the missiles by making a peace. What kind of, when they, God bless you.
Thank you.
Iran, when Iran has no incentives to make peace. Only a peace that gives Iran some incentives. What would that peace look like? Stop the genocide in Gaza. Make provisions for 2 states. Accept 2 states. Use that as the basis for peace. That would probably persuade, the Iranians to stop. And by the way, I think the Israelis would have to do something about, their nuclear weapons also. They're going to have to be persuaded to give those up. Either they're going to have to be persuaded to give those up, or they're going to have to be persuaded to agree to the Iranians, getting nuclear weapons also.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this asymmetric situation can no longer continue to exist. Why would the Iranians stop their bombings if these Israelis continue to insist on the situation where they have nuclear weapons and the Iranians don't? That situation has to change.
Yes.
So I think on that note, I'm going to say good night. I'm going to complete the video with Alistair Crook on Saturday. I have already a number of other pieces picked out for Saturday. I'll be back on Saturday at 9 p.m.
Yes, I should have a show tomorrow night.
Okay, that will be great.
Here around 9:30.
Okay.
And I'm awaiting Madeline to see if she's going to be able to join me.
Okay, that would be nice if she can join you. Do you know what you'll talk about?
Current events.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so you'll probably cover any further attacks and retaliation up to that.
Yes. Yes, I will. And also Gaza and the West Bank.
Okay, maybe to confirm that the foreign minister was killed.
Yes.
And look to confirm that a good part of Mossad was destroyed in terms of its people.
That's people have said that, but like you said, there's that confirmation if but Israel's just holding back.
Yes, Israel is holding back. Evelyn says, good show, a lot of insights. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Evelina. Yeah. Well, we will certainly learn more by tomorrow, and we'll certainly also learn more by Saturday.
Oh, definitely.
So for now, good night, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening, the rest of Friday morning.
I know, right? Good night, everyone, and good night, Bonnie.
Good night. Okay, good night, and thank you very much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Peace out and free Palestine.
From the river to the sea.
Amen.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.